We are in Forde Radio number 9. Big guest today. Lots of knowledge. As you can see, if you're on YouTube, the fact that he's completely putting me to shame with the enormous bookcase, and I've seen a preview of the angle around the corner. He's read them all compared to my minuscule. 2 or 3 about the Clash. They're not going to help anyone.
So I saw that they weren't really health related, but you and I share that in common, don't we? We're both into music, play guitar, all of that stuff as well. So it's all good.
Can't all be work. So David Hompes, we met in Virgin Active because you used to come in Virgin Active every day.
Yeah.
And we'd always say hello and get talking. And then I remember one January, we were like, what we're going to do for this year? What's the plans for the year? And I was like, oh, I'm going to put on some seminars. And you were like, oh, I'll come and talk at that. I was like, why? It's like, oh, I'm a personal trainer as well. I was like, oh, here we go. And then obviously we talked more. And then when I went to Pure, you came and did a little bit of training with me, more for the high intensity accountability than any of my little knowledge. If you just want to give us a little intro of your history in the industry, how you got started and where you are now.
Absolutely, mate. That'd be great. Yeah, we did. We met at Virgin Active. I was probably doing a few exercises that most other people don't do in there because of my background. It always sparks a little bit of interest, using the Swiss ball and the cable machines in different ways and what have you. But my history goes back. Well, I did sports science at university in the 90s. Then I did a master's in sports science at Loughborough. So I was at Loughborough for about 5 years. Very lucky to get an opportunity to do some work at the new gym that they opened down there in the late 90s, and also brilliant few months working with England Rugby as well, working with Dave Redding, going down to Teddington and Twickenham and doing fitness testing and, getting to mingle with those guys and see how they operate and what have you, which was great. Then I went traveling, and one a big turning point in my life was I was in Australia in Sydney. And I was looking for work because I was there for a year on the working visa. And I went to a job interview at a gym in Sydney, really nice gym. And I sat there thinking, I've got this covered, England Rugby, Loughborough, supposedly the best sports science university in the country. And the lady interviewing me, I just couldn't answer any of the questions. They were really tough questions, and I'd not heard those kinds of questions before.
Examples?
And I walked out feeling, I can't remember. I can just remember sitting there feeling sheepish. So, when you've just had your pride smashed to pieces, you sort of feel a bit wobbly in the legs and stuff and a bit sweaty in the palms, heart's beating and what have you. And I thought, what the hell was that? So I made a vow. I ended up getting a job for Vodafone in Sydney, which was amazing. They paid great money, more than I'd have earned at the gym. Loads of overtime, just answering the phone and selling upgrades on mobile contracts, which was good fun. But I vowed to start doing some more learning when I got back from traveling. And so I started to learn from Paul Chek, who C-H-E-K his name's spelled, Chek Institute in California there. And I started to learn a lot more holistic methodology. So corrective exercise, back pain, how to assess posture, and a whole raft of exercises that I'd never come across at all in Loughborough, progressing from the basics all the way up to more advanced stuff. So I did personal training for about 5-6 years between 2002 and 2007-8. During that time, I was also doing a lot of nutrition coaching as well, lifestyle coaching, very holistically. Gluten-free diets were not even heard of back then, but that's the kind of thing that we were helping people with at the time. Learned how to do something called metabolic typing, which is how to really individualize people's eating, what foods they should have to keep their acid and alkaline in balance, going way beyond the usual arguments of acid and alkaline, and also what ratio of fats, proteins, and carbs they need for optimal energy production, which, of course, there's a million arguments about that these days. What the metabolic typing does is it helps you hone in on the individual and figure out what they need, rather than all the noise that's around them in terms of keto versus high carb versus complex carb, vegan, and all of that crap. And then I had some symptoms myself. I had quite a lot of stress, some financial difficulties from a screwed up business early in the 2000s. And mum died pretty suddenly. She had septicemia actually, and just gone. It was a most bizarre situation. And so I had a lot of stress, and I ended up getting a load of digestive symptoms, felt tired, mood swings all over the place, dandruff and all of that. And I knew of a guy in California who did something called functional medicine. He's a chiropractor by trade, very holistic guy, Eastern medicine and all of this stuff as well. Chiropractor by trade. And I did a stool test at home using a private lab, did a crap and put some of it in a vial and sent it back to the States. And I did some saliva testing for my hormone levels as well. And it turned out that I had something called Helicobacter pylori, which is a stomach bacterium that causes ulcers and it can cause cancer. I won't go into that. I ended up writing a book on it, but I won't go into it because it's quite complex. But it can really screw your health up, this thing. Stops you digesting food, leads to nutritional deficiencies, lots of inflammation, all of that. And anyway, I fixed that pretty quickly. It took me about 3 months of taking herbs and nutrients specific to my needs, and all the symptoms had gone. And I thought, I want to learn how to do this. So I trained with the doctor who treated me for 6 months to learn how to use functional medicine. And so by that time, I've got the exercise background, the back pain corrective exercise, the sort of holistic nutrition. Now I've got the functional medicine angle, which is really where we run lab tests to find out things that are in the body that shouldn't be there so you can get rid of them, and things that might be missing or inadequate so you can put them back. So the things that tend to be in the body that shouldn't be there are things like foods that are either generically not great for people or that aren't right for you as an individual. You might have an allergy to a banana and not even realize it. That's a true story. I had a client who had a banana allergy, and we couldn't figure out what was going on until she went on holiday. Came back, she was fine on holiday. She came back, started to get the symptoms again, really bad digestive problems. And she sat down and wrote down, well, what was I eating when I got back that I wasn't eating on holiday? And she had a short list of bananas was one of them. So she ate bananas for a few days, then stopped, ate them, then stopped, and found out that anytime she ate them, it completely screwed her up. So it can be something like that. Anyway, you look like you want to say something.
I was just going to say, I absolutely know I've got a banana allergy.
Have you?
I don't need to do any tests.
There are generic foods that aren't great for people that I think everybody needs to be educated about. And there are certain specific foods that you'd never think would cause somebody a problem, but on an individual basis can be completely wrecking their lives. So just a few. So nuts and seeds can really screw people up, and they're supposed to be dead healthy on a paleo diet. Bananas, I've seen people have massive problems even with green vegetables sometimes, which is supposed to be, the perfect superfood, spinach and what have you. And there are many reasons for that. So foods is one thing that can get into the body and screw you up. Another one is infections. And we're not talking about an acute infection like flu or COVID or something like that. We're talking about...
We're not doing COVID today, please.
No, we're not. Moving. We'll do that in another. If your readers and listeners want to follow me, I'll be saying a lot about that over the coming weeks, because I've got a few feelings and opinions that probably people have not stopped to think about. But infections are things like H. pylori, stuff living in your gut, stuff living in your oral cavity, stuff living in your genitourinary tract. They can all hang around in there at what we call sort of a subclinical level. They don't cause the usual types of symptoms that an infection would cause, but they create an immune system response that can make you just feel terrible on a day-to-day basis. Skin rashes, headaches, low energy, difficulty sleeping, all of that common stuff. So finding out what's living in the body that shouldn't really be there and getting rid of it is potentially life-changing for people. And we do that using labs that are not affiliated necessarily with the medical system. They've gone off in their own direction and become specialized in finding these things. And the reason they've become specialized and the reason there's a market for them is that the medical system doesn't consider this stuff. They just don't really consider chronic infections or imbalances in your gut bacteria and things to be problematic. And even if they did, they don't have the right testing for it. There's pretty spectacular, unique way of testing using DNA and what have you. So that's another. The final thing that gets in the body that shouldn't be there, really, if we're keeping things simple, is toxins, chemicals from the environment. There's about anywhere between 80 and 100,000 man-made chemicals now in the environment. About 6 or 7,000 of those are high use. They can get into the body depending on your occupation and things like that. And you can have problems as a result of those building up in the system. A lot of controversy in January about whether you should do a detox. You were talking about that before we came on the interview. People say you don't need to detox because you've got a liver and kidneys. Well, your liver and kidneys have a certain capacity to be able to get rid of toxins. And if the capacity is exceeded, either genetically or because you don't have enough nutrients to run those detoxification pathways, you'll end up with trouble as a result of that. So anybody who says, no, detox is a waste of time, you don't need to detox, is missing the point. But I think it depends on where in the industry you're situated. If you're a personal trainer working with relatively healthy and fit people who are looking to train for performance or aesthetic goals, probably it's not that much of an issue in a lot of cases. But if you're working with people who are feeling crap, then toxins are usually part of the picture. Now, a lot of the toxins come from the bugs in the gut. And so if you fix the gut, then a lot of the toxic issues disappear. But you can live in a home with damp, and you'll be breathing in mold spores, and they can be dead toxic to you. Sometimes people feel terrible when they're at home, and then as soon as they go out for a walk, they feel fine. Go to work, they feel okay. Get back, feel terrible at home. So your environment's important as well. In terms of things that we need to put back in the body to get it working properly, that's very individual as well. You might need specific nutrients. You might need more B vitamins. You might need more magnesium. You might need more potassium. You don't know until you test somebody and see what is actually going on. Vitamin D is a huge one in the middle of winter. Huge amount of controversy around vitamin D and COVID at the moment. It definitely helps to protect from COVID, and it reduces the number of deaths. There's 20 odd studies now on that. And so if anybody wants to take one tip away and protect themselves and their loved ones, taking some vitamin D every day, 2,000 units to maybe 4,000 or 5,000 units a day, get that done because it's going to help.
Vitamin D tablets either need to be fat soluble or taken with some fats to get them.
Yeah. Well, ideally, I use drops. So I put them under the tongue. So the supplement manufacturers have come up with some ingenious ways to make sure you get the right dosage. You always have a risk when you're taking supplements that they're going to go straight through and you're going to crap them out and they're not going to be absorbed properly. If they're poor quality, as you say, if you don't mix them with the right macros, some of them need to be attached to sugar, some of them need to be attached to fats and things to get into the body. Vitamin D is fat soluble, like vitamin A, vitamin E, CoQ10, etc. So you really need them in sort of a gel cap, or what they do with the drops is you just hold them under your tongue and they go straight into your bloodstream through the capillaries, bypass digestion altogether. And you can also get patches these days. You can just stick a patch on overnight or during the day on your wrist or bottom of your foot where you can see all the blood vessels. Yeah. So the stuff gets in. So there's loads of ways to do
bottom
that.
Of your foot.
Yeah, you've got, if you look at your bottom of your foot on the instep, on the inside.
Right, yeah.
Loads and loads of blood vessels. If you can't.
I'm thinking of like my horrible heel all dry.
No, not dry scaly heel. No, on the where you're flat-footed, where your foot caves in. If you're flat-footed, on that bit,
yeah, the arch
inside of it. Yeah. So those nutrients are really individual. You, for example, I have a tendency towards high blood pressure because of my genetics. Even if I eat healthily and exercise and keep my stress levels under control, my blood pressure still creeps up. I didn't figure out why that was until 2015, when I tested my genetics. I looked at the genetics results and I'd done a whole bunch of courses on what's called nutrigenomics, which is looking at somebody's genetics and figuring out where they might be a little bit weaker in certain metabolic pathways than other people. So just looking at your own individual strengths and weaknesses, really, in terms of general physiology. And I just had a whole bunch of stuff that was grouped together that all affects blood pressure. And when I dealt with that using slightly higher doses of supplements, I got the blood pressure right down literally in 24 hours. So totally controllable through nutrition. Whereas a doctor would have gone, you need to be on meds for the rest of your life. So Getting rid of the bad stuff, putting the good stuff back is really what functional medicine is all about. And it's using these lab tests that very few people realize are there, that just add to what the blood testing and what have you in the NHS would give you, which is reasonably, I mean, let's say they're quite frugal with the NHS testing. You get the basics, and you don't realize, unless you listen to somebody like me waffling on, that there's a whole bunch of other stuff that you could test that could really protect you in the future and help you feel better now. But because the NHS has a budget, they keep it down to very, very, very tight, frugal amounts of testing, unless they think there's something serious going on.
Yeah. I mean, is that down to the NHS is kind of there just to keep us alive and keep us going rather than thriving? And if you've not got anything life-threatening, the NHS is more, their mission is to just keep people alive.
Yep. Well, the NHS is very good. Well, let's just say the medical system really around the world. Let's not sort of smash the NHS here, because we need the NHS, but the healthcare model isn't really a healthcare model. It's a disease care model.
Yeah. That's what I was looking for. That's what I was thinking.
It waits until you're unwell, and then it gives you something to reduce the effects of whatever it is you have. But it doesn't seek to get to the underlying reason why those symptoms or that illness are there in the first place, right? And nearly everything is a lifestyle-related issue. It comes from the model we've just talked about, things being in the body that shouldn't be, and things missing that need to be there, the seesaw, if you like. And it comes from psychology, stress, things like that, potent causes of many problems. And it comes from also, the structure and the mechanics of the body as well. So diaphragm's not in the right alignment, some muscles are tight, some are too slack, spine's not aligned, people have had concussion, all those things. Yeah. They're all the underlying causes. But, the medical system or the disease care system really says to you, if you're unwell, it's because you've a drug deficiency. You need to take more pharmaceuticals and they'll get you right. But you're not suffering from a pharmaceutical deficiency. A headache is not an aspirin deficiency, right? High blood pressure is not a deficiency of high blood pressure drugs. So we need to look at that, and we need to own it as individuals as best we can. Now, not everybody is in the, socioeconomic, at the socioeconomic level, and they don't have the background to take ownership. So we need state support for those people. That's the argument between right wing and left wing politics. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Individual responsibility, you get what you deserve, versus no, some people need help because they were brought up in a fucking shit environment and they literally don't know any better, and you can't blame them at all. But if the drugs don't work, we go on the operating table, don't we? So the medical system's basically saying that your illnesses are caused by drug deficiencies, which is bollocks, and an excess of organs. And if you have a problem with an organ, we need to whip it out. And then you'll be all right. Now, you take that organ out, you'll be absolutely fine. Gallbladder, tonsils, appendix, and all of that stuff, ovaries.
I've got no tonsils.
Haven't you?
I was worried, will I be able to protect myself from COVID?
They help your immune system. They sample bacteria and things, and so they do help your immune system. They're not... they call them vestigial organs, meaning they're still there, but they're useless. So they used to think the appendix was useless. They used to think the tonsils was useless, but they found that they're both really important for the immune system now. So that Mother Nature doesn't keep anything without a reason through evolution. There's been millions of years it could have got rid of the tonsils. So if they're there, there's a reason for them to be there.
Indeed. So from here, great intro, love all that, and I thrive on that. And I used to love training on you because I'd give you some abuse, and in recovery I'd be like, just what do you think about this? What do you think about that? All the time. So I just wanted to go into here some kind of case studies and some examples where you've used what you've just spoken about to help people and families and people get back on track.
I've got 3 or 4 that I thought would be really useful for today, because it's just sort of a wide range of different things where these methods are applicable. First one's probably my favorite case study. It's just one that sticks out. When I was getting started in functional medicine in around 2007, 2008, and I was lying in bed at about midnight on a Saturday night, got a phone call from an unknown mobile number. And I thought, no, I'm not answering that. I thought, maybe it's my lucky night. But it turned out to be a lovely old lady. She was in her 70s, and she was really weak and feeble with her voice. I don't mean that in a derogatory way. She was just feeling really unwell and unconfident and what have you. So I phoned her back. She phoned again, I think, at 8 a.m. on Sunday. And it's the weekend, so I'm not phoning her back. But Monday morning, first thing, I phoned her back. And turned out that she'd been diagnosed with H. pylori about 4 months before. And they'd given her...
Remind us what H. pylori is.
Stomach infection. They gave the Nobel Prize in 2005 to the discoverers of H. pylori. Well, they didn't really discover it. They just showed that it causes stomach ulcers. Nobel Prize for it. So it's quite a famous bacterium.
It's a big one.
Yeah, it is. It is. And it's got a corkscrew shape, and it screws into your stomach lining. Ooh. And it causes inflammation. So heartburn, stomach pain, indigestion, changes your appetite, linked with IBS, but can affect lots of other things as well. We've seen some seriously weird stuff clear up when H. pylori's gotten rid of. Cut a long story short, they gave her 3 consecutive courses of antibiotics to get rid of the H. pylori. Now, many of the people watching or listening will know that when you take antibiotics, it can mess up your microbiome in the gut, all the trillions of bacteria that are actually meant to be there as helpful organisms. And anyway, she went into a situation from having heartburn and stomach pain. She still had that, but now she had diarrhea. She was basically incontinent, so she couldn't leave the house. So that's how much it had screwed her life up. But she wasn't feeling any better, but they kept giving her the antibiotics. This is the problem with the medical system, which is it's one-dimensional. We've only got one thing to do when you have these symptoms, is just give you antibiotics. So we ran a stool test. The H. pylori was still there. She had a yeast and fungal overgrowth as well. Won't go into too much detail about that. And she had a parasite called Blastocystis hominis. And I gave her herbs to get rid of the H. pylori. And then on another month, another 30-day chunk, we did the parasites and the candida, or the yeast and fungal overgrowth. And we changed the diet. Gluten-free, got her off cow's milk for a period of time just to let her settle down, all that stuff. 90 days gone, all symptoms disappeared, everything back to normal, got her life back, and totally hunky-dory. Now, that's bizarre, right? We have a healthcare system that's supposed to do that for people. And yet, not only did it not work, but it made her worse. And then they had nowhere else to go after that. It's just hit a dead end. Sorry, you're on your own now. You can't go out because you're going to crap yourself. Yeah, that's terrible. It's really terrible. Next case study. This was a last year. 4-year-old kid diagnosed with autism. So not communicating very well, not developing, cognitively as he ought to be, interacting with parents and things not great. Special school, all of that stuff. Basically, the family had sort of resigned themselves, well, he's got autism, might grow out of it. But the medical system, again, washes its hands of these kinds of situations because it's a chronic issue. And the only thing that the medical system could do for chronic issues is give drugs to reduce the symptoms. So there's no cure for that. And what's worse is they tell you you've got it for life, which is false. And I think that should be illegal.
What? You can't grow out of autism?
You can. But it's not just that. So let's say you're diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis or multiple sclerosis or lupus or something like that. They say, all right, this is just going to progress. You can't get rid of it. But I know loads of people who've gotten rid of that stuff, gone completely, reversed it, even though that's supposedly impossible. And I've helped a lot of people reverse those situations. So I've seen with my own eyes and heard with my own ears that is possible. So when doctors and specialists say, you've got this for the rest of your life, it's going to progress, there's nothing you can do about it, that's shocking. Because not only are they just giving drugs to manage the situation, they're actually telling people that the problem cannot be resolved, and that's false. And that irritates me a lot, as you can tell. But going back to the 4-year-old, I said, I think there's something we can do. Let's run some tests. So we ran a stool test, and he had some bad bugs growing in his digestive system. We ran something called an organic acids test, which sounds fancy, but you just pee in a pot in the first thing in the morning, and you take a pipette, stick some of it in the vial, and you send it back to the lab. And they look for over 70 different markers for metabolism. And some of them are related to the gut. Some of them are related to nutrient deficiencies, energy production, that sort of thing, detoxification. Really good test. Turned out that he had mold toxins in his gut, as well as what we found in the stool test. Now, he also had really high levels of something called oxalic acid. This ties back to spinach.
Right.
Oxalic acid is another name for oxalate. And oxalate is a substance in plants, nuts, seeds, grains, leaves, stems, etc. It's a defense mechanism that plants use to upset the stomach of things that want to try and eat it. Right? So plants have defense mechanisms. This is one of the arguments of the carnivore and keto people, that too many plants can actually be toxic for you, right? Yeah. And that's true for some people, because remember, nutrition's always got to be individualized. There's no one size fits all. But anyway, we know that oxalates can cause autism. So they were feeding him these, because their family was from Colombia. They were living in Orlando in Florida. But they had a traditional corn breakfast thing that they gave him every day, and smoothies and fresh juices and things, thinking that was really good. But some of that stuff was really high in oxalates. So they're pumping the oxalates in there, and the mold and yeast and fungal overgrowth in his gut, those organisms also make oxalates. So he was just totally overloaded with oxalates. So guess what we did? Changed the diet, got the oxalate levels down, got some things in to start to kill off these bad bugs, some nutrients to help him process the stored up oxalates. Within a week, enormous change. Starts to communicate with people, just like, whoa, that is incredible. And so, that's another case where you go, so-called incurable problem that is going to affect the family for the rest of their lives. Absolutely. Improved just from running a couple of tests that the medical system doesn't know about and considering things that they don't consider. Another kid, this one was a younger one, 2.5 years, developed epilepsy when he was weaned onto solid food, stopped breastfeeding and went onto solid food. That's always a clue. When did the symptoms start? What was going on, right? You don't need to run loads of tests. Sometimes you just need to listen to what people say. Oh, wonder if it's something that he's eating that's triggering it. So I worked with a medical doctor on this one, because it was a bit of a, 2 years old is pretty tricky. Epilepsy is a pretty heavy condition to have. And this won't work for everybody. There are lots of reasons why people might have epilepsy. My mum actually had epilepsy. So I've seen what an epileptic seizure looks like in somebody, dear to me. So this family was going to have that for the rest of their lives, unless he grew out of it, which was just a chance thing. So we said gluten intolerance can sometimes cause epilepsy. We sent them a video of a neurologist in America talking about this, with 4 or 5 case studies where the epilepsy cleared up on a gluten-free diet. But they took this information to the specialist, the neurologist, pediatric neurologist. I think it was St. Bart's in London, top kids hospital. And he just dismissed it point blank. Don't be ridiculous. That's not scientific. What? It's not scientific for people to get well when they stop eating a certain food. No, it's not a double-blind, placebo-controlled study, so it's not scientific. Load of utter nonsense. So because we had the medical experts saying one thing, we were trying to say, look, it has to be worth just trying to stop gluten in his diet. We did an hour and a half consultation. Just do it. Like the amount of persuasion that was needed was remarkable, but it just rams home how programmed people are. How can something so fundamental as gluten, which is in pasta and bread, how can that cause such a nasty disease in somebody? And how can the medical system not know that? Yeah. So people are reticent to believe that causes a problem. You're fighting it's a massive juggernaut, the medical system, and people are programmed by it. They are in the COVID pandemic at the moment. It's a joke what's going on at the moment. And we can maybe do a whole show on that sometime.
Keep moving, get off it.
Anyway, the upshot of it was they finally decided to do the gluten-free diet. Guess what happened? Seizures. He was having like dozens of seizures a day, mini seizures and things like that. They started to tail off, and within about a week, they'd pretty much stopped. No epilepsy anymore. So it's just bonkers, right? That this stuff is not delivered by a medical system that's supposed to care for you. This is the bit that frustrates me. It's not that I think that the staff are bad, the doctors, the nurses, the specialists, they're not bad. They're programmed through a pharmaceutically funded medical system to have a certain outlook and a certain paradigm or worldview. And we need to step outside that worldview to help people most of the time get well. Nobody's denying the need for drugs, the need for surgery, the need for all of this stuff. It's not that. It's just that if you want to get rid of chronic problems, day-to-day problems, you need to step outside the medical model. So next case study, I know you wanted me to mention a couple of maybe more active ones rather than health-based ones. Footballers, for example. I've worked with quite a few footballers and some sort of actors and actresses and things as well. And we get this impression, don't we, that we see them running around on a pitch or the other end of a camera in a movie. And we think that, wow, they look so fit and healthy. But it's not always the case. You know, I've worked with particularly the footballers. Sometimes there's a lot going on. You know, they have sensitive contracts at work. You know, they're worth a lot of money. And they don't want to readily admit to teammates and management that they're feeling terrible on a day-to-day basis and that they're not recovering from training and they're not performing as well as they'd like to and not recovering from injury and things like that. So think of the best one. I think my favourite was Middlesbrough player who they were in the Premier League at the time, and he was being touted for international service, and he got injured, and he could not recover from the injury no matter what.
What injury was it? Approximately, it
was legs. It was a pulled. I can't remember exactly what it was. It was either knee injury or a hamstring or something like that, and he just couldn't heal it, and so he was starting to get depressed and stressed, which obviously now becomes a vicious cycle. Because in order to heal from an injury, you need your rest and digest side of your nervous system working, not the fight or flight stress side. So anyway, same process, looked at what he was eating, lots of pasta, all the stuff that the sports scientists tell athletes to eat, you know, and all that, or certainly did back then. And his gut was a real mess. He holds the record still to this day for the number of bad bugs that I found in his gut using the stool test. There were 7 different ones in there. Right. So he wasn't digesting his food properly. His gut was really inflamed, not getting nutrients into his body, stuck in the inflammation stress response 24/7. So all we did was change his diet again. Oh, he had the highest level of gluten antibodies that I've ever seen as well. So got him off gluten, you know, tweaked and changed his diet, made it more paleo, just because that can be useful for healing. No grains, very little dairy, all of that stuff, no soy and what have you. So then we cleaned out his gut using herbal protocols again, probiotics at the right time. And lo and behold, all of a sudden, he feels a completely different person within himself. His wife notices that he feels like a different person and recovers from his injury and gets back to playing and all of those things. So that was a really interesting one. And I've had a few like that, you know, footballers. And the moral of the story is there's a lot of people walking around looking good, but feeling terrible on the inside. And this stuff affects everybody. You know, it's not just limited to normal people like you and I. It's all the way up sort of what you might call, you know, the social gradient and all the way down as well. So this is really powerful stuff. Another case study with a footballer. He was waking up at night with a little bit of pain in his chest and just feeling like he wasn't, just in here. He just felt like he wasn't quite at his peak. And again, you know, you and I would probably not think too much about, well, you and I would, because we're tuned into our health. A lot of people wouldn't think too much about it or just ate something, you know, must have just be something that I had for dinner. I've not digested it, blah, blah, blah. An extra 2 or 3% at that level of performance. Again, this is a guy, I think at the time he played in the Premier League, FA Cup finals, that sort of thing. And he was now in the Championship, but he still had a fair few years to go in his career. That extra few percent.
Championship's high level, it gets frowned upon, but.
And it needs almost more physical fitness because there are more games. It's more demanding in the Premier League in the pure physical sense of it. So, we basically did the same thing, looked at his nutrient status. There were a couple of nutrients that he needed to top up. One of the things that I think is really important about that case is, you know, we've got this really huge push towards omega-3 omega-3, fish oil. You've got to have all of that stuff. It's anti-inflammatory. It helps you recover and all of that. It helps your heart. Well, this guy had been taking loads of omega-3s for that reason. And when we looked at his fatty acid levels, the omega-3s were off the scale high. The omega-6s and 9s were completely deficient. And it's not like you still need the other ones. It's not that you just need, off the chart omega-3. You need all of them in the right balance. So he addressed that, but he had H. pylori again, and herbal protocol, get rid of the H. pylori, stopped waking up at night, no more pain in here. And he went, I can't believe that was something, so simple. And when I told him about, the possible consequences of H. pylori, in fact, let me just do 2 minutes on it now, because it's something that I learned a lot about.
Let's go.
When you have it, it causes inflammation. Heartburn, as I said, bloating, typical day-to-day digestive symptoms can be caused by that. It affects the rest of your microbiome further down the gut as well, changes the bacterial balance. It can reduce your stomach acid levels. Sometimes it can increase them. If it reduces them, you won't digest your food properly. Several nutrients, the main ones being B12, iron, magnesium, we know for a fact that it stops or reduces the absorption of those nutrients. So if you don't get those nutrients into your body, guess what? You feel tired, you can have headaches. So now you see how a problem in the gut can lead to issues elsewhere in the body. So now you get your headache, you go to the doctor, you've had a headache for a couple of weeks, and you go, I need something for the headache. The doctor gives you aspirin or whatever, or you go to over the counter. The problem's not in the fucking head, it's in the gut.
Yeah.
It's caused by something elsewhere in the body, and everything is connected. The H. pylori, because it causes this inflammation, can damage your stomach so much that it leads to an ulcer, or it can lead to gastritis chronically, and that can make you feel terrible as well. The inflammation itself can lead to problems elsewhere around the body. You start to get inflammation signaling potentially in the brain. You can feel depressed, start to lose your memory, get brain fog. H. pylori produces ammonia, other gases, things like that, toxins that can cause other problems. So all of a sudden, one little bacterium living in your gut has potentially created half a dozen or even a dozen different symptoms. And you're at a loss to figure out what goes on. And the doctor goes, well, I can't give you drugs for headache, fatigue, depression, heartburn, IBS, etc. Because you just end up walking down the street rattling like a maraca or something because of all the pills that are, crashing together in your gut. So this is a problem. So what we're doing again with the functional medicine is what the cause of the cause of the cause, right? So you keep going back until you identify, well, what is the actual cause of this? Keep asking why until you hit it. And that's what we do with all of these case studies.
When you say herbal remedies,
yep.
And I appreciate you can't give out exact herbal remedies, but it's not the Italian herbs you get from the supermarket.
No.
It's not basil that you've chopped up.
So
approximate. If
we're talking about herbal supplements for therapeutic use, we're talking about things that can change your hormonal balance by acting on the different glands and organs of the body. We're talking about things that can stimulate or suppress metabolic pathways if you've got something that's under or overactive. We're talking about things that can kill bad bugs when they're living in your system somewhere. And so they're therapeutic herbs, and you use them like drugs. Now, most of the antibiotics on the market were derived from herbs anyway. They're derived from plants. What they do is, this is the way the pharmaceutical system works. They'll find natural substances, and then they'll get the molecular scientists in the labs to try and change the molecules slightly, stick an extra hydrogen atom on there or carbon there or whatever it might be. Yeah. And now that's a man-made molecule, and we've made it. And now we can patent it. Yeah. And because we can patent it, we can earn and charge whatever we want for 15 years or 20 years or however long the patent is. And when the patent runs out, all the other companies can make cheap copies. And now it becomes what's called a generic drug. And it's not really a profit center so much anymore for big pharma. That's what's happening with the vaccine, by the way, for COVID, just slipping that in there. And so, because there are lots of cheap drugs and solutions for COVID that are not being used, and that's annoying. So That's what happens. But a lot of those, for the antibiotics in particular, are derived from the very plants that we use in these supplements. So the supplements come in little liquid tinctures. You drop them in water, or you take capsules, and they usually have a mix of different herbs or plant extracts in there that kill off the bad bugs. And because there's a selection in each pill, the bad bugs can't become resistant to it like they do with antibiotics. Single antibiotic, drug resistance in bacteria is through the roof, and that's a major problem. That's why sometimes antibiotics don't work for people. Going back to H. pylori, they use 2 antibiotics and an acid blocking drug for the treatment. And still that doesn't work sometimes because the H. pylori is resistant to one or even both of the antibiotics they're using. So it's a big problem. But the H. pylori can't become resistant to something that's got 10 ingredients because each ingredient is it's not clever enough to build its resistance to lots of different things at the same time. So we know exactly, they're usually 30-day protocols, 2 with breakfast, 2 with dinner, or 2 when you wake up, 2 before you go to bed. If that affects your sleep, take them earlier in the day. So we work with people really closely to make sure that it's right for them as an individual rather than just a one-size-fits-all approach.
Which I think is key for all personal training and all kind of, when you work with someone one-to-one, it's got to be designed for them.
Absolutely. Great example. We go back to the headache, or we can go back to heartburn. Let's say heartburn. Heartburn can be caused by foods that you're eating, can be caused by coffee, can be caused by tomatoes and tomato-based foods, citrus foods, can even be caused by milk allergy. You can have problems in the stomach from milk. So it can be food related. It can be due to low levels of stomach acid or high levels of stomach acid. It can be due to stress. It can be due to a hiatal hernia because of the posture, or even if you're a personal trainer and you're getting people to lift heavy weights, sometimes that can affect the diaphragm and cause a hiatal hernia. That can cause those symptoms. So how do you know what to do? By the way, the medical system just says take an antacid. So how is an antacid going to resolve a hernia? It's not. How is an antacid going to solve a milk allergy? It's not. So the cause of the heartburn is very individual. It could be H. pylori, could be some other bug overgrowing in the system. What about headache? Could be stress, again. Could be posture. It could be trigger points, couldn't it? Referred pain from neck and shoulder and back muscles that you and I both know well about. Could be due to B12 deficiency or a magnesium deficiency, or foods that are creating a histamine response in your gut. There's loads of reasons. So what you have to do is ask people and listen to what they tell you. When do you get it? Are there any times during the day or the week when you feel this more or less? What particular situation are you in when the symptoms flare up? Is it at night? Is it in the morning? Is it lunchtime? Is it when you're with certain people who stress you out? All of that kind of thing. And you listen to them. So that then tells you, right, these are the priority action steps based on what you've told me. Let's try this first. And if that doesn't work, then we're going to do this. But there's always a sequence of events that you say, right, we know we're going to fix this, but we don't know exactly what's going on right at the start because nobody's got a crystal ball. If the dietary changes don't work, we might need to run some tests to find out what's going on, right? It's going to cost you a few quid, but if you want to get well and you want to stay healthy for the rest of your life and not risk developing more problems, you need to put your hand in your pocket. The NHS is free, but it's crap for this kind of thing, right? It doesn't work. Works when you have an accident, when you have a serious disease or a serious infection, trauma care, acute care, medicine. Not great for chronic conditions at all. And so that's the way you do it. It's like peeling layers off an onion one at a time until you hit the layer that is the underlying cause. Sometimes it's easy. The epilepsy one, who would have thought that a kid's epilepsy would just be a gluten issue? That was easy. It was like, whoa, we got that one, sorted that one out. It's a great case study to share with people. Sometimes it's more complex. So the kid with autism, there was more than one thing going on. And that's going to take a bit more time to fix properly. And a lot of my clients, recover in layers as well. This protocol helps them feel 10% better. The next one, another 15%. And then they might plateau and we go, all right, something stopped your recovery here. What is it? And that might be where we talk about psychology, what's going on in your life.
I was going to mention it. I know you've been working with psychologist DeMartini. Is he a psychologist?
Yeah.
DeMartini?
my whole new system is called Higher Minded Health. So it gives you an idea that there's some psychology involved. Very simple story. I started off with personal training and nutrition. I had some excellent results with that, but I was always frustrated that some people didn't get results. You know, in our industry, as you know, on Instagram and what have you, everybody puts out the success stories, and you know that they're only successful with clients maybe 50, 60% of the time. There's a whole bunch of train wreck relationships, working relationships with people that didn't work out, where people didn't do what you wanted them to do. They didn't make the changes, or you did something that upset them. And we shove them under the mat, don't we? We say we don't. So I got honest with myself and looked back, you know, why are they not working? Why is that not working? Then I added the functional medicine almost because I had to, because I needed to fix myself. So some people got really well with the functional medicine and the nutrition, but still some people didn't get well. It's like, why are these people not getting well? Even though I'm sending them to osteopaths and chiropractors and things to get their internal organs, you know, realigned and diaphragm sorted out and try and make sure there's no nervous system issues here, still not getting well. And that's when I stumbled across the effect of psychology. So we know about the placebo effect, right? It's about 35% of all healing responses, they reckon, is placebo. So 1/3, that's a lot. And we all know that we've had occasions in our lives where we've been listening to a piece of music or something, get goosebumps. Okay, psychological factor causing a massive response that gives you goosebumps all over your body. We've blushed when we've been embarrassed. Instantaneously, our skin color changes like a bloody octopus, you know, blending into its background, except we stand out rather than blending in. Yeah. Your heart beats faster when you're stressed or anxious. Driving test. Who wasn't stressed out for driving tests?
Don't get me started on driving tests.
Sweaty palms. These are real physical changes. So if our psychology can create those changes, surely it can create smaller changes in the body that lead to symptoms that people experience every day. And that's actually, you know, what happens. So I give you a case study to just give you an idea with this. This might be a little bit tough for people to comprehend, but it's my favorite mind-body case study. In fact, I'll give you two. I have a friend in Australia named Carlos, and he used to have multiple sclerosis. Now that's
just go through the symptoms of MS.
Autoimmune disease that attacks the myelin on your nerves. So your own immune system attacks and destroys the myelin on your nerves, meaning that you become more and more disabled, if you like. It's a little bit like ALS, which has been in the news a lot because of Rob Burrow. It's not the same, but you know, the effects are, you know, wasting and just your nervous system can't do its job anymore. Pain, inflammation, you know, terrible condition. Anyway, he was that pissed off with his life that he thought about taking his own life, suicidal. He'd already got his affairs in order, and he was going to leave his estate to his brother and stuff because he wanted his brother to have a great life. And so this was, you know, you sort of tear up when you tell the story almost. So I met him at a seminar in Johannesburg, which was all about the evolution of the cell. It's a pretty geeky course.
We love a geeky course. Go on.
It's 5 days on the cell. It was pretty tough going. So I said to him, well, what did you do? You must have detoxed, gluten-free diet. You must have loads of bad bugs in your gut, blah, 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 blah. Went off with my functional medicine paradigm with him. And he just looked at me as if I was a nutter. And he just went, I didn't do any of that. He said, I went to this seminar over 2 days and I made some huge realizations about my life, my relationship with other people, blah, 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 blah. And a week later, symptoms had gone. Medical tests showed that there was no autoimmune activity on the nerves anymore. So it's what's called a spontaneous remission. And that was all through psychology. Now, I'd already had a couple of years, about a year before that, a lady I was working with broke off a 20-year relationship with her husband amicably, moved about 60 miles from, I think it was Devon, back up to Gloucester or Bristol area where she lived or where she was brought up and where all her friends were. There's about 7 or 8 symptoms cleared up just because she did that.
She moved house?
Yeah, change in identity, change in lifestyle, away from it wasn't a stressful relationship. It was just a sort of loveless relationship. And around the same time, I worked with a lady who had a very similar issue where she was living a life to please everybody else. 30 days of coaching to get her to change her schedule and help and you know, just feel a bit more worthy in herself. and all her symptoms went away. Do the things you love to do in life rather than the things that other people expect you to do. And all of a sudden they went away. So psychology is enormous. So anyway, it's sort of going, nutrition helps lots of people, but there are some people it doesn't help.
Yeah.
Functional medicine goes on top of that and helps you investigate deeper what's going on. And that works a lot of the time, but not every time. So what's going on? The psychology is a huge factor in all of this. So people underestimate the effect of psychology on health. In fact, there's a guy, I'm just making notes on this book at the moment. It's called Status Syndrome. Michael Marmot wrote it. He's in his 70s now, but he's researched this for 50 years or more. He's shown that in a society, things like cholesterol and diet and smoking and drinking and things like that can only account for about 1/3 of the discrepancy between sort of the wealthier people and the poorer people in terms of the disease gradient. Whatever social hierarchy you're in, whether it's in the corporation that you're working in, whether it's in your city, whether it's in your country, or whether it's between countries, there's a hierarchy or a gradient of health. And it's not that it's rich versus poor. If I'm in the middle, the people below me are going to have worse health and the people above me are going to have better health. No matter where you are in the hierarchy, that rule stands.
Yeah.
Right? And they've shown that about 2/3 is due to psychosocial factors. You can't account for the differences with nutrition and exposure to toxins and physical environmental factors. It's to do with whether you feel you have control over your life. I won't go into what the lockdown does for that with COVID. It's to do with whether you feel you're able to integrate with society and be a meaningful contributor. It's to do with feelings of social isolation, all of this stuff. Now, all of that is being fucked up by the lockdown. So if 2/3 of our health problems are caused by that rather than the physical stuff, we're going to end up with a massive problem that way exceeds any problem that COVID itself would cause for us. So I just thought I'd throw that in. So that's been researched over 50 years. He's advised the government. In his introduction, the first paragraph of the book is basically, interestingly, people don't want to listen to this stuff because it gets too political, right? It's a socio-political issue. So for my purposes in higher-minded health, it just helps me train practitioners and just help me get my clients to understand that the psychology might be a hidden factor in what's going on in their health. And that's literally, for me to be able to share all of that, it's another hour's conversation. And it's probably actually 5 levels of my training program, which I'll shamelessly plug on here, which is really what I want to do for practitioners to help them understand, all of this stuff that we're talking about here. So psychology is massively important, but we must never dismiss the idea that nutrition and training and exercise, because, they're important as well.
Incredible. When you get going, I feel like a little boy. I just get smaller and smaller. Like the fact that spinach potentially could be causing problems, when I get the majority of my clients to eat more spinach and try and get some more vegetables in. And
well, we've got to always just throw the caveat in there. It's not that common.
Yeah.
Right. It's a very individual, and sometimes you have to have a certain number of factors come together and sort of create a perfect storm. Yeah. For something like the oxalates in the spinach to cause a problem. Maybe a genetic weakness in getting rid of oxalates, coupled with some fungal overgrowth in the gut, which is creating oxalates.
Yeah.
Having a green smoothie every day, and they've been doing that for 2 years. And over time, it's just built up and built up and built up and built up and built up. But just with the oxalates, everybody's heard of kidney stones, right? People get kidney stones. They are very painful. They are oxalate crystals in the kidneys. And those oxalate crystals can develop anywhere in the body, not just the kidneys. But again, medical system ignores that. They don't talk about that at all.
Again, I think we could have a whole series of the things that each case study that you've got into today. So I think we definitely need...
Each case study in its health is sort of a podcast, because you can go deeper and explain exactly what's going on. You can have some slides showing, here's what the lab test showed. Look, can see it in plain black and white on the piece of paper here, or on the PDF. But going back to what you just said about feeling small, that's one of the social factors that can create ill health in people. The Nobel Prize a couple of years ago in medicine was given.
How do you know all these Nobel Prizes?
It's just learning from people. It's standing on the shoulders of giants. It's look, literally, it's been, I developed the ability to speed read, and learning and education is my number one value in life. That's what I love. I like absorbing knowledge, repackaging it, and teaching people in as simpler way as I possibly can. And so I just studied a lot, spent over $100,000 on education after my degrees. And I've found people who are very good at what they do and been mentored by them, rather than jumping through the hoops to just get more letters after my name with, master's degrees and things like that. Because ultimately, you and I have had a chat about this when we were training together. The education system, the academic system, it's not necessarily set up to help you succeed in life. The skills that you need to be successful in life aren't really taught in academia. And I got a first-class degree and a master's from supposedly the best university in sports science. And I struggled to get a job. And I realized when I started learning from all these other people, that fucking degree was rubbish, really. It was rubbish, compared to what I've learned from these people. But I get the letters after my name and the credibility from the degree. Yeah. Whereas these people initially, even though they might be geniuses, aren't as well known. Your BSc and MSc after your name count for a lot, even if they taught you jack shit, really.
Yeah, I mean, certainly some of the things from my degree that went wrong, like a lot of the practical skills were courses on top of that you had to do. Yeah. As well. And they organised them the week that your dissertation was meant to be in. Stuff like dry needling and massage tools and Mackenzie courses and stuff. Yeah, these are stuff that the tools of the trade that you need when you're working.
Yeah.
We're on top of the degree.
Yeah. So for me, it was a whole bunch of disparate information, all different modules all stuck together. I actually did a joint honours. I did geography because I thought I might be a PE and geography teacher. And it's all disparate modules put together, and then you have an essay and an exam on it. And that's supposedly giving you a degree and helping you feel better and confident, more confident. And I came out of university feeling like a right cocky little shit. Yeah, and I was smashed around the face. I was like speed slapped around the face when I got into the real world and realized, my God, I need some serious further education here because I know nothing. And that sort of got me at every point of my career. Just when I think I've got it all, something comes along and whacks me and I go, shit, I knew nothing.
No. Yeah, useless.
That's why I've dedicated my life to learning, because I realized I know nothing. Socrates said, the reason he was considered to be the smartest man on the planet is because he admitted he knew nothing.
There you go.
So.
Hang on, I'm just computing that. Right, fine. Yeah,
because he was willing to admit and humble enough that he knew nothing, because there's so much to know that we just don't know.
Absolutely. Right, we're just shy of an hour here.
Cool. You said we wouldn't need the full hour.
Well, you went for it. I've said nothing. I've just been sat here. I mean, I've been sucking it in. Absolutely. So at this point, sometimes in some podcasts I say, have you got any takeaway points? But I think the way you work with your clients is there's no big takeaways that everyone should eat more spinach or don't drink milk. Or
point is to understand that it's a very individual thing. Yes, of course, there are generic things that are going to hurt people. You can't, take toxins and survive. Everybody's going to die if they get anthrax or whatever. It's not, there are generic things, but really if you fine tuning, it's an individual thing. You're going to need a different proportion of macronutrients. Your body's going to respond differently to different foods you eat. And if when you're eating foods and doing exercise, you still feel crap, it's a surefire indication that there's something else going on that you might want to look at. And you might want to look at that from a physiological point of view using something like functional medicine, or you might want to look at it from a psychological perspective. Keep a diary, really tight diary. What time do the symptoms come on? When do they go away? Who were you with? What were you doing? What did you eat? And you'll get some headway in that. You'll start to spot patterns. And if you can't spot any patterns, then you probably need to do some investigation and figure out what's going on in there that's hidden that you don't know about. And that's really the takeaway. I think the other thing that I want to encourage people, I used to work a lot more in the performance end of it, working with relatively healthy people, doing exercise, fine tuning, performance based stuff.
To make them better.
Give them that extra few percent, or for the aesthetic purposes. And the reason I moved into the health stuff is because even though I'd worked hard on the aesthetics and knew the exercise and all of that stuff, I still got ill after stress and not looking after myself very well. And so I wanted to make a difference in helping people who have been, I'm not going to say let down by the medical system, because the medical system is what it is. It's not, there's a specific purpose for it to be there, and that's not to optimize health. And it's not even to get people to recover from health conditions. It's to manage those health conditions. Yeah. It's a management system, not a healing and curing system, except in some individual cases. And so I wanted to just help people who've been told, it's all in your head, go home, there's nothing we can do about it, take these drugs, it'll just get worse over time, you'd better get yourself prepared for that, and all of that rubbish. I want to address that dogma and stand against it because it's rubbish. Sure, there's a few people who get into trouble with their health and there isn't really much you can do. But for the vast majority, if you're willing to put the work in, change your mindset and your worldview and realize that the symptoms are really just signs that there's something going wrong in your body or in your life, then you can fix it. And I want people to understand that they can fix it and not be a slave to this drug-based and surgery-based system, and get them empowered so that they're in control of their own destiny, health-wise. That's really what it's all about.
Absolutely. So very briefly, as we finish up, what are you doing to stay on top of lockdown and keep yourself in good mental order? And do you think Liverpool are going to win the league again?
I don't think Liverpool are going to win the league again.
Ooh.
I think they've been very, very unlucky with injuries this year, but it was always going to come because they had a really good season last year with very few injuries. It's like the perfect season, really. I don't think they will this year, but now Thiago's fit, there's a chance. Big game on Sunday versus Man U.
Biggest game.
If they win that, my optimism will be elevated and raised a little bit again. If they lose it, they'll be 6 points behind, and that's quite a lot already. So maybe, let's keep our fingers crossed. What am I doing? I've got my adjustable dumbbells. I've got my medicine balls. I've got my bands, all of that stuff. So I'm doing a few bits and pieces here or there. But that's quite an interesting thing. As I got more and more into the mind, I studied and worked on that so much that I almost forgot about my body. Remember when we were training, I was always moaning about niggling injuries and stuff. And the shoulder in particular, I got really bad this summer because I just neglected it. And I've done about a dozen osteopathic sessions. I've got an osteopath just down the road and they've got it back almost to normal again. But it's like, focus on one area of health and the other one goes. And it's not easy, right? You've got to spend some time working on it and addressing all of it very, very, very gently and steadily, not expect a quick fix. I think we're in January now, aren't we? This idea I'm going to get
definitely in January.
I'm going to stop drinking for a month and eat healthily and all my troubles are going to go away. That's an unrealistic expectation. If you want to really optimize your lifestyle, you want to set a year or two aside and not pressure yourself to try and do too much too soon. Yeah. One change a week, that's 52 changes in the year. Now that's going to transform your life. But if you try to do 52 changes in a fortnight, you're just not going to manage and you're going to beat yourself up for failing and then vicious cycle and you're down. So yeah, I'm keeping myself reasonably fit, but I am horrified at how unfit I am compared to where my own standard is. But I'm not going to beat myself up about it. I'm just going to steadily get back up there again.
Totally fine. Right. Again, thank you for coming on.
Pleasure.
I find it really valuable. Hopefully the people who've been listening and messaging me will find it also really valuable and they'll be able to have a look at how they can improve.
If they fire questions across to you about certain conditions and issues, we could maybe do a question and answer one.
We can absolutely, get yourself on. We're not doing anything else, are we?
Things. And if I could just plug my new website, it's only an embryonic website. It's just one page at the moment. But if people want to learn more, and just get on the mailing list for newsletters and all of that stuff. It's highermindedhealth.com. So Higher Minded Health. It's not hyphenated or anything. It's just all one word, highermindedhealth.com. There's just a little field in there where you can leave your email address. Ignore the video that's there at the moment because it's not the right one, but just leave your email address and we'll get stuff out to you that's going to be helpful.
And I've listened to Higher Minded Health podcasts as well. Are they still live on iTunes?
Yeah, they're going to be. We're going to be releasing. I've got about 10 or 12 of those recorded now, so we're going to start drip feeding those out 2 a week. It's on iTunes. It's on all the usual channels, and so that's going to be going. We're going to have some really, really, really cool guests. You know, many of my mentors and teachers and people like that I'm going to have on to discuss things, and you know, people who write books. So if you don't like reading, we'll get people on who've written books, and they can just spend 45 minutes talking about the book, and you can get the gist of it without having to read the damn things.
Perfect.
Amazing. Cool, man. Thank you very much for having me. Much appreciated.
My pleasure. My
Always
pleasure.
Great to chat.